So, right-wing populists have now stormed to victory all across the European Union. At long last, the EU Parliament elections have taken place, and the people there have made their voices heard. Countries like France, Austria, and Germany had huge victories for the right, gaining vast amounts of power, opening the doorway for a chance for change. Behind all of this is the growing dissatisfaction, the anger over mass immigration being forced upon the citizens of the EU, as well as the Orwellian and dystopian socialist green policies that have been damaging the farmers and, by extension, all normal citizens. This has led to people of the bloc rejecting the status quo. And no more was this blowback more significant and more notable than in France, where you had a complete implosion of the French president Emmanuel Macron's party base, which was humiliated by having only 14% of the vote, less than half of Marine Le Pen's right-wing National Rally Party, in the EU Parliament elections. So to discuss this further, I'm going to open up an article from the New York Post. This is titled "Right-Wing Populists Notch Huge Gains Across EU and European Parliament Elections, Throwing Governments into Chaos." This is written by Ronnie Reyes. He writes, "The right strikes back. The president of France was forced to call an emergency election as populist right-wing parties made stunning gains in elections held across Europe Sunday. President Emmanuel Macron announced he would dissolve his National Assembly and hold elections next month after he was humiliated by voters in the European Parliament election. The anti-immigration, anti-European Union National Rally Party led by Macron's arch-rival Marine Le Pen is projected to get at least 31% of the vote, more than twice as many as the president's pro-European centrist party. The Le Pen said that the French people have sent a clear message. They no longer want a technocratic, out-of-touch European construction which results in loss of influence, identity, and freedom. The RN, by the way, according to exit polls, it looks like they're going to pick up roughly about 30 seats in the European Parliament. Combined with the other so-called far-right parties in France, they picked up roughly 40% of the national vote. And even the president himself commented about this bloodbath, saying that it was not a good result for parties who defend Europe. And he said that he could not act as if nothing had happened, and that led him to dissolving the National Assembly. Now, what this means for France is that there will be a snap election starting on June 30th. Macron is gambling that the RN party will have trouble getting candidates in order for all 577 assembly seats. But he's taking a big risk here, as he could also lose the majority that he currently has, which means that the National Rally Party could take power, leaving Bardella to become appointed the likely prime minister if his party gains power. And essentially, this would make Macron a lame duck for the remainder of his term. Anyway, the article goes on to write that in Germany, the right-wing Alternative for Germany party took second place in the polls with 16.5% of the vote, despite being mired in controversies, even placing ahead of Chancellor Olaf Scholz's party. Germany's left-of-center governing coalition parties are estimated to barely secure a combined 30% of the votes. The Green Environmental Party, for example, the second biggest in Scholz's coalition, only secured 12% of the vote. Alice Weidel, co-head of the AfD, touted her party's projected victories on Sunday despite the negative headlines that have followed them, including the conviction of one of their leading politicians last month for closing out a campaign speech with the infamous Nazi slogan, "Everything for Germany." Weidel said that we've done well because people have become more anti-European. People are annoyed by so much bureaucracy from Brussels. And she mentioned the CO2 emitting cars as one of the examples. Now, I want to back up a second here because this is important. These convictions, like the one for Therese Marie Kaiser, who was convicted for pointing out gang rape statistics of Afghan migrants in her country, what we're seeing here is essentially the German government trying to shut people up. They don't want German citizens talking about what is happening in their country if it goes against their plan. The elites within Germany have been playing classic dirty politics with their relentless efforts to delegitimize the AfD party. They have gone even so far as to try and ban the party outright to thwart the will of the German people. And yet, the AfD still managed to become the second largest party in Germany. Now, the article goes on to write that before Sunday, the signs of a major shift were apparent. In the Netherlands, anti-immigration populist Prime Minister Geert Wilders increased his seats of the European Parliament from 1 to 7. The Liberal parties narrowly won the most votes. The nationalist victories signify a shift to the right for the European Parliament, which could fragment the EU, this according to analysts. Kevin Kühnert, the head of the Germany's Social Democrats, said that this is a hard defeat for us today. And let's see. Then in Belgium, the New York Post writes that the prime minister announced he would resign after national elections in the nation of 11.5 million people saw his center-right party's vote share projected to drop to less than 5%. The projections in Germany and France were expected to be repeated in other European Union countries, with Austria's right-wing Freedom Party coming out on top in the nation's polls over the weekend. Now this, by the way, is also historic, as the right-wing Freedom Party of Austria, otherwise known as the FPO, won their first national election here, ever. They received 27% of the vote ahead of the Conservative People's Party and the Social Democrats, which each had 23.5% and 23% respectively. Now, the article goes on to write that the change in the European Parliament's makeup could make it more difficult for the governing body to pass legislation and even paralyze the world's largest trading bloc, as conservatives may be more likely to take a nation-first focus, less concerned with the EU as a whole. European Union lawmakers who serve a 5-year term in the 720-seat parliament have a say in a wide variety of issues affecting the 27-member bloc, including financial rules, climate policies, and agriculture laws. It also approves the budget for the EU and is in charge of the aid being delivered to Ukraine in its fight against Russia. Now, what will be interesting to watch here is going to be the elections upcoming in France. The people there have voiced their frustration against the actions of the EU Parliament, and they will now have a chance at showing their disdain with the current ruling class in France itself. The citizens of Europe do not like being crushed by their governments. The disregard that the elites have towards the average people in Europe is obvious, and it is obnoxious. You have the driving issues here that are taking people to the polls is the climate scheme, which is crushing the farmers, which is crushing the people. The mass immigration crisis, with the millions and millions of non-Europeans flooding the Union, which has led to a rise in crime, balkanization, and a growing threat against the European way of life. And then there has been the cultural issues, the push by the EU leaders to globalize and tear down each country's national identities, to strip them away, including traditional values, by pushing multiculturalism, which is just anti-white propaganda. All of these things are resonating with the voters. Yesterday was a repudiation against the ruling class. Now, whether or not this will translate to the French people coming out in droves and voting to upset the apple cart within France itself, well, only time's going to tell. On the To Be Frank show, my friends, thanks again for watching as always. I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.